Amen. You can be seated. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How's everybody doing today? Good. My name is Nick. I'm one of the pastors here. We are so glad you're here today. We believe church should be relevant, simple, and real. And we are in the middle, smack dab in the middle of a series entitled Becoming the Villain. And if you've following us, what we've said every single week is every one of us, whether we like it or not, whether we want to or not, there is a temptation, there is a struggle. And if we're not careful, over time, not in a day, not in a week, not in a month, sometimes not even in a year, but over time, we will slowly become the villain of our own story. In fact, if you think about it, what we've said is, listen, in marriages, you start out as the hero, right? Or your spouse started out as the hero, and you stood in front of a whole bunch of people and said, I do, and they said, I do, and everybody else said, yes, they do, and everybody was excited, and everybody was the hero, but statistics say, over time, it's not during the honeymoon, it's not the next weekend, it's not even the next month, it's sometimes not even the next year, but over time, unwatched, unfiltered, we become the villain. And what we've been saying up to this point is every single one of us, doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter whether you're in middle school or you're 85, all of us have fears. Fears that deep inside of us manifest themselves in unique, different ways, in ways that we wouldn't say, oh, that's what I'm scared of, but ways that influence us and make us the villain. And today is no different. Today we're going to continue the story. And if you got a Bible, I want to encourage you, turn to 1 Samuel 17. We're going to continue the story and continue the story of a man named Saul. And if you weren't here, the backdrop is Saul was chosen to be the king, the first king of Israel. He was chosen because he was a head taller than everybody else. He was handsome, and God picked him because his role was to lead the nation of Israel into battle. He was supposed to be the front man, the man that went in and led the charge, and everybody else was going to follow him because that's what leaders do. That's why he was chosen. Up to this moment, he's had some fears. We've talked about him. He's had some struggles. But up to this moment, he has led the charge. He has done what he was asked to do. And today, we're going to look at a story that if you went to church at all in your life, you've heard this message. You've heard what we're going to talk about, but hopefully, we're going to look at it from a very different vantage. Because today's story is David and Goliath. But there's a reason it's not called Saul and Goliath. And today, instead of looking at it from David's perspective, which is where most of the messages come from, and David's this guy, I want to give you a behind-the-scenes look at what Saul went through. Because I think that is really where we're at. And so if you got a Bible, 1 Samuel 17, if not, we're going to put up on the screen, it says this. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubits and a span. Now, people argue, theologians argue about how tall that was, whether it was 7.5 feet tall, whether it was 9 feet tall, whether it was 11 feet tall. Here's what I'm going to say. Dude was tall, okay? That's all I'm going to say. Like, nobody walks up to Shaq and be like, you're not very tall. Like, he was tall, okay? So I don't know how tall he was. What I know was he was a freak of nature. He was a literal giant. And I'm not sure how tall, but what I know is in their eyes, in the Israelites' eyes, he was small, he was large, and they were small. And where I want to go today is this: you have giants. You have things that it doesn't really matter the size, does it? Doesn't really matter whether it's 8 foot tall or 9 foot tall or 10 foot tall. They seem like giants. They seem like things that you would never get past. You have a marriage problem, and it feels like this giant issue in your marriage right now that you can't get past, that you can't have that loving, whoa feeling again. You've lost it. You have kid problems and relationship problems, and you look at them, and they're gone, or they're not coming back, or they're home, and they're not leaving, or whatever it is, right? Just depends where you're at. And you're struggling, and there's some stuff. Maybe they've got a problem. Maybe they did something. I don't know what it is. And you're looking at it going, I don't see how we fix that. It's a giant. Maybe you got debt. We've talked about that before. Man, debt can feel like a giant, can it? It shows up in the form of little white pieces of paper. But if you've ever struggled with mounting, and I'm talking like mountains of debt, isn't it crazy how a small, insignificant 2-cent piece of white paper can cause so much fear in your heart when you get that bill in the mail? And for some of you, you have a stack of bills. and it feels like a giant. I don't know where you're at. Could be a health issue. Could be a relationship problem. Could be a conversation that you need to have with somebody that you're just avoiding like the plague. It's like every time you see them, like you turn around, you're like, oh, they're there, I'm not. You're already planning out Thanksgiving or Christmas, and how do I avoid them? Why? Because I don't want to see them, I don't want to talk to them, I don't want to go there, I don't want to have that conversation. Why? It's a giant. For some of you, it's just a straight up addiction. It's a battle that you fought, and you may never have called it a giant, but you've got a problem with something or someone or something or some habit or some place. And every time you go up against this giant, every time you get all pumped up and you're like, I'm going to stop and I'm never going to go and I'm never going to think about it and I'm going to do whatever, like, you muster up enough courage, you muster up enough discipline. You realize it's bigger than you, it's stronger than you, it's badder than you. This is their story. And I say it all the time. I try to say it all the time. I hope you get this, that their story is our story. And as we read the scripture, hopefully you let it read you. Because you have giants like they had a giant. Theirs just had a name. Your name is different. But the story goes on. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine and are you not a servant of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. And so all of a sudden, I want you to picture, this is really come important, especially later on in the message. There's two battle lines, there's two hills, there's two armies on the hill. There's this vast area in the middle, and they're lined up, and somewhere along the lines, Goliath walks out and says, listen, hey, this is crazy. There are thousands of people here today. Listen, let's not have a whole bunch of bloodshed. Let's not do this the wrong, we're neighbors. Let's figure this out in a civilized way. You send your best guy. I'm their best guy. And here's the deal. One of us will die, and the other one, we're just going to assume that that's how the rest of the battle is going to go. And listen, we're just going to save a whole lot of bloodshed. Wouldn't your wives be happy with that? Wouldn't your spouse be? Doesn't that seem more civilized? Doesn't that seem easier to do it that way? And the whole thing, and he goes on. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us. Then the Philistines said, this day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight for each other. And the battle lines are drawn. He calls them out. And what I want you to know today is your battle lines are drawn, whether you realize it or not, that you have a giant in your life that's calling you out all the time. And this should have been the moment that Saul stepped in. In fact, here's what the next verse says. And Saul rushed to the battle line and killed Goliath with his sword because he knew the Lord was with him. Now, that's not what it says at all. Some of you went to Sunday school. Good for you guys. Yeah. No. Here's the deal. There's a reason that we call the story David and Goliath, isn't it? And not Saul and Goliath. But again, I want to rush over this. That's what Saul was called to do. That's why they hired him. That's why they got him. So that he would go before them, so that he would be the man, so that he would go out, and you know what? If somebody's going to die, he's going to die. That's why we got him. Sorry, the job comes with perks and negatives. This is the negative, Saul. Go do your job. Saul's on the sideline. And I don't have time to unpack it today, but let me just tell you one of the things I think happens in this moment. One of the reasons is because all of a sudden Saul's advantage was gone. Week 1, if you remember, if you were here, I pointed out that Saul, it says in the scripture a few times that Saul was a head taller than everybody else. So here's the image. Every time Saul went into battle, he had a height advantage. He walked in, he had all the armor, he had the sword, he had a height advantage. He was the man. And reality was, he was probably leaning more on his advantage than his God. But I want you to know that God will, at some point in your life, put you in a situation where your advantage becomes your disability. Where the thing that you lean on the most will become the thing that you cannot lean on at all. Because all of a sudden, up to this moment, Saul's been the hero, Saul's been the guy. And he runs into somebody bigger and badder than him. And says that this guy was also a head taller than everybody. And this guy was a head taller than the guy was a head taller. Some of you, you're leaning on your money because you've got a lot of it. And I just want you to know that there will be a moment probably. Well, God will put you in a place where you can no longer lean into your finances. You're leaning into your health, and you're thinking, I'm healthy, and I'm fine, I'll be okay, and I can do this, and I can handle this, and I'll be okay. And you'll get a doctor's call. You're leaning into your discipline. You're like, I would never do that. I would never, and you'll find a day. I'm just telling you right now that's where God does. God will put you in a position where your advantage is gone and you will be exposed. And you have to make a decision. Do I really believe in God? Do I trust in him? Or am I ultimately trusting in my advantage? Saul does not trust. And in fact, here's what it says. Here's what it really says. On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. They were scared. They sat back and they hid. And Saul is becoming the villain of the own story because he's made some mistakes in the past, and up to this moment, they'll be okay, but this is kind of a big one. This is one that everybody sees. Up until this moment, if you've been following us, the stories have been, the fears have been things that he could hide, but this is the first one that like everybody sees, and Saul is somewhere hiding behind his fear of a giant, just like you hide behind your fears. You hide from your giants. You hide and you run. We all have giants, and we all are tempted to do this. But at the end of the day, the fear that we're going to talk about today, the fear we're going to go, is this fear of giants that we all possess. But the story goes on, it gets even better. It says this, for 40 days the Philistines came forward every morning and evening and took his stand. 40 days. Every morning and every evening. Here's what that means. Saul had 80 opportunities. 80 moments. 80 moments where Goliath came out and said, listen, I challenge you. Listen, come on, let's do this. Come on, let's fight. Saul went, nope. Somebody else want to fight him? Nope. Not going to go there? Nope. Not going to do that. Anybody else down the line? Nope. Nobody else down the line? Okay, let's just go. Come back. Come back later. 80 moments. 80 times that he walked away from God's calling on his life. See, I think sometimes we just hope things go away, don't we? Like there's things in our world that we know is there, and we know it's a problem, we know it's an issue, but do you ever, and maybe you're like me and maybe you're not, do you ever just sit back and go, you know what, if I wait it out long enough, it'll go away. If I just ignore that enough, then it'll go away. If I just don't deal with it, if I just don't address it, if I just don't go there, if I just don't kind of admit that that's a problem, if I just kind of ignore it, hopefully just kind of put my head in the sand, like, oh, no, it's not there, it'll go away. Happens all the time. All of us do this. At the end of the day, what I want you to see is this. The giants just don't go away. They have to be confronted. That over and over and over again, I believe that if David wouldn't have stepped in the day that he steps in, that Goliath would have kept coming over and over and over again. And I think there's a reason for that, and we're going to get to it here in a few moments. But what I want you to see is this, that you have a giant, and your hope and prayer maybe even is God just take it away, and that's not really how God works. That's not really how this world works. Your debt will not just go away. Your thought of we'll just declare bankruptcy will not fix it. Your divorce will not fix your problems. You know why I know that? Because if you're in a marriage and there's problems, there's two of you, not one of you. You finding somebody else, it's not going to fix it. Because some of you are on your second and third or fourth marriage and kind of going, that's true. Like, she ain't great, but like it's me. Your kids, let me just see that. I'm going to pick on you for a second. Your kids at 3, if they're a spoiled brat, they will not magically get better at 8, okay? Right? Like all the older people are like, that's so true. Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I got a 24-year-old. Yep, still living. Like, it doesn't go away. But here's what I see. I see parents abdicating the responsibility. We talked about this week 1. And the role that they're called to be, hoping that, you know what, let me just get through the season. Let me just get through these terrible tools. I'm not going to discipline them. I'm not going to take care of it. I'm not going to deal with it. Why? Well, they're going to get older. It'll get better. No. They become adults. And that's a bigger problem. You neglecting it here will turn it into a giant over there. The problem for many of us is not that we don't know what giants are in our world. The problem for many of us is we're not sitting around going, man, I got no problems. I'm ready to go. Let's go. No. The problem for many of us is we see the giants and we've just built ourselves this line in the sand where we refuse to cross. You know what the saddest part about this whole story is? Saul's on the sidelines of his own story. Some of you right now, you're on the sidelines of your own story. You're just sitting back and you're watching and you're living life through your kids or through your spouse or through other people. You're on the sidelines of your own story. You're not living the life God called you to live because you're scared, because you're frozen, because you're afraid if I step out, then what will happen if I mess up? What will happen if I start to do something that God's called me to do and it doesn't work out? It's just easier for me to kind of stand over here. You know what? There's comfort in a whole bunch of people. Nobody else is stepping out into that calling. No one else is dealing with that giant. I'm just going to stay right here. But what I think Saul missed was Saul had a unique calling. Saul was the king. Saul was supposed to fight the giant. What I want you to know today is this. What I hope you get out of today is this. You have a unique calling. God's called you to kill some giants. God's called you to kill some stuff in your world that maybe you don't want to fight, but what's holding you back. And here is the unique part. Here's what I really hope you feel. I want you to feel the weight of this, because I feel the weight of this. That the giant that Saul should have killed would have freed a whole nation. There were literally hundreds of thousands of people relying on Saul. There are literally dozens of people, maybe hundreds of people relying on your faithfulness, your obedience. Your kids are at stake. Your marriage is at stake. Some of you, you've got a secret addiction. It will cost you your marriage. It will cost you your job. It will cost you. It's way bigger than just me, myself, and I'm just going to stay here with everybody else on the sidelines of my own life. No. There's way more at stake. We've said that the whole series. And I get it's scary. And we're going to see how to get over it here in a few moments. Because there's a secret in this story. There's something subtle in here that just I missed. I've read this story dozens and dozens of times that I missed, that I want you to see. And so I want you to know, I get why you're on the sidelines. I get why I'm on the sidelines so often. But we can't stay there. The giants won't just go away. My hope and prayer is today, as you leave today you walk out empowered and strengthened in the hope that you're going to kill them like David did. So if you read the story, we're going to skip over all the David stuff because I told you today is really about Saul. It's not about David as much, but if you read the story, David shows up and David hears Goliath and he is just frustrated with what he hears. And so he steps into it. He's like, man, I got this. David's not nearly as tall as Saul. It's not nearly as battle-ridden as Saul. It's not really nearly as gifted as Saul, but he's willing. And it says this. David said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of the Philistines. Your servant will go and fight him. And at this moment, you would hope that the faith of a child, the faith of somebody smaller and more insignificant would inspire the king to do it. You would hope that, but that's not really what we see. What we see is that Saul's have to is David's get to. See, I want you to know here today that some of you, you're looking at a situation right now and it's a have to. But I want you to see it's a get to. That ultimately, your have to is someone else's get to. That you're in a marriage, okay, and it's not perfect, it's a little problematic, and they want to talk to you, and for whatever reason, you're like, oh my goodness, I don't want to listen to your stories, I don't want to come home and talk to you, I don't want to have to do that. But here's what I want you to see, don't miss this. I do way too much marriage counseling, and this is a big part of it. Your have to, listening to them talk, I promise you. Somebody at work, it's their get to. There's somebody at their work, and they dress up, they put on some nice cologne or some nice perfume, and they can't wait to listen to those stories. They can't wait to talk to that person. Your have to is someone else's get to. And if you do not deal with it, I'm just telling you right now, you will be replaced. Your kids. Oh, man, there's so many have-tos with kids, right? There's just so many have-tos. I don't have to discipline them. Cool, don't. Don't discipline them. I don't have to do that. I just promise you, at some point in time, somebody else will. Be in a penitentiary, probably. Be with an armed guard. Somebody else, listen. And they'll get to. That's their job. They're like, line them up. With your kids, let me push a little bit longer, because I feel like that's a big one for us right now. Sex. How many people love talking to their kids about sex? Just real quickly. Yeah. But I'll tell you right now, you have to. Ooh. There's a lot of people that want to. They go to school, and all their friends want to. You remember high school? Come on, let's be honest. Come on, right? Like you didn't go to high school and be like, let's talk about the Bible study last night, Wednesday night. That's not what you talked about, right? You didn't do that. No, you were talking about her, and you were talking about him, and you were talking about what they did on Friday night. You're talking about, listen, your have to is somebody else's want to, and here's the deal. You will be replaced. If you don't face the giants in your world, if you don't deal with this, somebody else will. Some of you, it's your job. And the crazy, most backwards part is you're complaining about the very thing that you prayed for. You prayed for that job, and now you're dealing with people, and you're like, oh, my goodness, I have to deal with this person. I have to call them back. I have to do whatever. You just need to know something right now, just for all those you complain about your job, for all those that on Mondays like, oh, my goodness, here, just remember this. Somebody else is praying for the position you don't want, and they will replace you. It's a great story in baseball. Wally Pips, I think, is his name. I'm not quite sure, but he played for the Yankees. And the story goes, if you look it up, he was a first baseman, and he's pretty good. He wasn't an all-star, I don't think, but he's a pretty good player. And he had a headache one day, and just, you know what, like 162 games. I got to go out. I don't want to. Tells his coach that. Coach looks at him and goes, hey, listen, here's the deal. No problem. While I take an aspirin, sit down. We're going to let this new guy come in. He'll take your place today. New guy's name was Lou Gehrig. That guy never played first base for that team again. Your have to. I don't know what it is. Your have to is someone else's get to. And as long as you look at your giant and think, oh, I have to, you don't see it as an opportunity. See, David walked into it. This is so crazy. Saul looked at it and said, there's a big giant and I have to fight him. I don't want to do this. David walked in and thought, oh my goodness, are you kidding me? Hold up, let me get this straight. If you read it, it's fascinating. He reads the story, he's like, hold on, wait a minute, let me get this straight. He goes, and he asked more and more questions like, so here's the deal. I get to fight this guy, right? Yeah. I can throw things at him? Uh-huh, you can throw things at him. Okay, cool, so I get to fight him. Then I get a hot girl, okay? Like the princess comes with the deal too? Yep, you get the hot girl. Okay, cool. And then I get money. Yes, please. Yes, right now, yes. All kinds of yes. Let me go, yes. I want the glitz, the glamour, and the glory, okay? And the girl, okay? I want, give it all to me. Where is the downside of this? See, David didn't see a downside because he didn't see the giant. He just saw his God. Some of you, all you can see is the downside because all you can see is the giant and you're not looking at your God. I need you to know this. You've seen the story. We've said the story. Story is not Saul and Goliath. The story is David and Goliath. It's the intro. It's the start of Saul starting to become the villain more and more and more, and God working him out. And you just need to know this today. You don't deal with your giants. I'm telling you. Somebody else will. You are replaceable. And that's not the feel-good thing that I love to stand up here and preach at River Lake Church, but that's just the honest thing, that you're not special. You're not unique in the sense that God can only use you. You're unique in your calling. You're unique in your gifting. You're unique in the path that God has for you. But at the end of the day, God will replace you. Like that. Saul abdicates his responsibility and goes, I don't want to deal with it. And God goes, okay, cool. Let me introduce you to the future Lou Gehrig of Kings right now. His name's David. And that's the story. See, at the end of the day, here's what I want you to see. You overcome your fear of giants by fighting the giant. That's what it is. That we've said this every week, that you take off this hoodie, you take off this thing when you realize, you know what, that your calling, your job is to fight. It's not to cower, it's not to talk about your fears, it's to stand up and fight, to stand up in the gap where God's called you to fight and fight. Fight for your family, fight for your job, fight for your rights, fight for your problems, fight for your future. To fight. And we have become such a passive culture that's all about, listen, let them do it, and why can't I do it, and why isn't it free, and I don't want to work for that, and why can't I have it now, instant gratification. No, fight. You were made to fight. You were made to, don't miss this. Some of you have had so many failures and beat down the past that you see the Goliath and you look at it like Saul when we're called to look at it like David. We're called to get up and go, God, what do I get to do today? What giant do I get to fight today? Where do I get to point towards you with my life today? What is on the plate today? Oh, it's Goliath on the plate. Done. Because you read the story, and Saul's like, you can't fight that. And David's like, are you kidding me? No, you don't understand. I've killed a bear. I've killed a lion. I've killed a billy goat. Probably not the billy goat. But anyway, I've just, I've killed all these things. Like, listen, I've been here, done that. My plate's full. My trophy room's full. Saul, I got this. I've been here. I'm telling you, I don't know what your Goliath is. I don't know what your giant is. You were made to fight, and to fight like never before. But here's the problem with me saying that. Here's what I struggled with all week. In fact, I struggled with this several months ago as I was writing this, and I got a team of people that I walked through creatively, and we had a whole bunch of questions about this whole deal. And here's what hit me. Here's what you may be struggling with when I say this. Nick, that's a cute little statement. Got 2 F words in it, and the right kind of F words. So anyway, it's a nice little statement. I've tried fighting. I've done that. It didn't work. It's how we started the message today. That's why some of you are here. You've tried your addiction. It didn't work. You tried having that awkward conversation with your spouse. It didn't work. You tried helping your kids, and you disciplined your kids for like an hour or 2 hours, and you took it away, or you did this or whatever, and they threw it at you, and whole deal. And as I'm standing up here talking, it's just so easy, isn't it? So easy for me to say that. It didn't work. But there was a subtle thing that happened in this story that I want you to see that I think is the key to the whole message today. Because you have to be willing to cheat. See, here's what I want you to see. Quit letting the enemy dictate the rules you play by. Did you notice that in the beginning of the story? See, Israel showed up, and if you remember what I said a few minutes ago, Israel showed up, and they had their whole army, and they had the ark of God, and they had the presence of God, and they were going to take all their men, and their king, and their ark, and their God, and all collectively together, they were going to fight the battle, and they were going to win. They had confidence in that. But what does their enemy do? The enemy will always call you out of the protection of your people, your friends, and your family. The enemy will always call you out of the protection of God. It will call you away from it, and it will make it a one-on-one match. And when that happens, all of a sudden, you do not feel the security, you do not feel the strength, you do not feel the help, do you? All of a sudden, when it's a one-on-one battle, it's kind of like, oh, you realize you don't measure up. Their strength was sapped the moment they started to play by the enemy's rules. Some of you have an enemy that is calling you to play by their rules. And every time you walk out to fight it, you lose because it's just you and him. It's just you and her. You think it's one-on-one. You think it's about what you can do and what they can do, and it's just a physical match. And of course you lose. You got to quit playing by the enemy's rules. The enemy wants to get you alone. The enemy wants to pull you away from your church, wants to pull you out of small groups, wants to pull you out of community, wants to pull you away from all these things. You want to know why I love small groups? You want to know why I'm doing a Bible study starting this Wednesday night? You're more than welcome to come together and kind of do some unique things. You know why that's so important? Because the enemy will always call you away from community and away from the battle lines, away from the strength in numbers, away from the people that can protect your back and your sides. It will call you away from your presence of God. And you're right. You walk out today, you try to kill your addiction, you try to kill your situation with your spouse or your kids or your finances or whatever. You look at your job and you're going, Nick, you don't understand. There's no way I can do that on my own. There's no way. I don't have the money. I don't have the job. You're right. You don't, but you weren't made to do it alone. You weren't made to do it by yourself. You're playing by the enemy's rules. The moment that you start to look at the giant instead of the calling and your God, you've lost. You've got to quit playing by the rules. Paul writes something in the New Testament. It's a passage I come back to all the time. I need this. And he's writing to Christians, and he reminds them of something so incredibly important that I think we forget about. And he says this: since you died with Christ to the elemental spiritual forces of this world, why? He's begging with him, he's pleading. Why, as though you still belong to the world? Why are you fighting a physical worldly battle? Why are you still doing this right here? Why are you focusing on a horizontal? Do you submit to its, here's the cool, rules? You've let the enemy define the rules with which you play by. And then he goes on, do not handle, do not taste, do not touch. That's every rule book, isn't it? You go to self-help books in Barnes & Nobles or whatever it is, the self-help is the largest section in all of the bookstore. You know what they all say? Don't touch, don't handle, don't taste. Bunch of rules. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. You would think with all the books we would have to fix it if that would help, wouldn't you? You would think if that had any real value, we would be able to buy a book, read it, and go, oh, that's how we do it. Done. Marriage is better now. What happened? I read a book. Like, wouldn't that be awesome? That's not how any of this works. He goes on. These rules, which have to do with things that are all destined to perish with use, are based on merely human commands and teachings. They're worthless. Then he wraps this up. It's my favorite line in the whole book because it just breaks me. It gets me every time. He says this: such regulations have an appearance of wisdom, meaning you will do good for a while. You read that book, people are like, no, it's a smart guy. Yeah, look at all the don't do this and don't do this. Make sure you go there. Make sure you eat this. Make sure you don't go there. Make sure you, man, smart guy. Look at that guy. It's the way to do it. With their self-imposed worship, their false humility, and their harsh treatment of the body. I ate kale every day. Look at how thin I am. Yes, but your life stinks. Anyway, so you smell like kale. Stop it. Anyway, so I ate Oreos, and I'm sweet. Look at that. So anyway. Don't miss this. This is what I want you to see. But they lack any real value in restraining sensual indulgence. And the key word, sensual, not sexual. It includes that, but it's not limited to that. You know what Paul's writing here and saying? It's so important. And he's writing to Christians. And it applies to non-Christians too, but he's writing to Christians. He says, listen, you know what your temptation is? It's my temptation. It's Saul's temptation. It's all of our temptation. It's to be forgiven, but not free. To be forgiven of the debt, but still be paying and playing by the rules with which the debt system has given us. To walk through life and think, oh, I'm so glad I'm forgiven, and now I've got to work on it. Now I've got to try harder. Now I've got to come up with the right system, and God, I'm gonna do this. I'm going to get up early, and I'm going to pray, and I'm going to read. I'm going to do all these other things like this, and I'm going to have all these things, and I'm not going to go there, and I'm going to have the hard conversation. I'm going to do all these different things, and God, then I'll be good. Paul writes it. He says, don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. You can fight that giant and kill that giant. You know what's going to happen? Inside of you, he says. He says you might treat your body really harshly. You might have this self-imposed worship, like, look at how awesome I am. Look what I'm doing. Look what I overcame. Look what I haven't done that. I haven't gone there. I fixed that. Look at how great my marriage is. Look at how, he says, you can have all that. He says, here's the deal. It lacks any value in restraining sensual indulgence, meaning there will be something inside of your soul that still craves it, that still does it. You are forgiven, but not free. You still are obsessed with it. You might be great with a whole bunch of rules and said, I'm not going to go there, and I haven't done that in 3 years, and I haven't gone there, and there is still something inside of you, he says. There is something in your soul. And even if you get past your issue, you know what happens? Because you were made to worship. You're just going to swap one addiction for another addiction. You see it all the time. I quit smoking. What'd you do? I ate. I quit sleeping around and finding my validation and value from other people and how many people I sleep with. What'd you do? I just really started getting my validation out of my job. I started buckling down. I started working hard, and I started climbing up the ladder. I don't care about money anymore. I quit chasing that whole deal. What do? I just live vicariously through my children. My children are amazing. Look at them. I spend all day with them. I do everything for them. They're just so awesome. He says, you're just going to swap it. There's no real fix there. And then verse 1 of chapter 3 is everything. He says, since then you have been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on the things above where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. You know why David won? David was looking in the right direction. David wasn't looking at the giant. He was looking at his God. And as he looks at his God is so much bigger and stronger and more powerful. The giant looks like an ant compared to his God. And as you look at that, Paul writes and says, that is the solution to your giants. That you were never made to do it alone, and of course you can't do it alone, and of course you're a giant right now. Maybe you've lost 1,000 times to it. He goes, okay, cool, but would you try it this way? Would you try it a different way? See, it hit me this week as I was studying. I never noticed this, but David walks and picks up 5 stones. It says 5 smooth stones. Five smooth stones, and I told you that he had to cheat, right? I told you he cheated. Because a guy that has a slingshot, this is very different than what we look at it, right? I mean, I think slingshot, I think this little bitty thing you got a PB kind of, might, hit your eye, might poke your eye out, Christmas Story style, that whole deal. Might do something, but it's not going to be a big deal. But back then, a slingshot, you wouldn't get a pebble. You'd get a rock. And you could sling that thing, and it was like a bullet. It was like a gun. And Goliath had a sword, had a big, heavy sword that he could have picked up and kind of swung like this. David had a gun. Who's going to win, the guy with the gun or the guy with the knife? This is an easy fight. In fact, you read the story, there was no drama. There was no problems. David literally walks up, picks up a stone, looks at him and goes, hey, how you doing? Done. On ESPN later that night for the shortest fight of the night. I mean, that's where it was, right there. That's it. That's all it was. It was nothing. Here's what hit me, though. He had some stones or rocks. And in the New Testament, it says that Jesus is the rock, that he is the rock. And so what David threw, what David hit him with was not his own strength, was not his own might, was not what he brought to the table. No. He realized, I needed something else. I need something outside of me. And I believe that that's the imagery there is he has Christ with him, and he used Christ to hit him. And it was Christ that defeated the enemy. And too long you've been fighting these battles thinking, if I could stop, if I could fix, if I could control. Instead, what God's saying is, no, quit fighting those battles. Pick me up. Use me. I'm what will provide you salvation. I'm what will provide you freedom. You can't do it. That's the gospel. And it's crazy as Christians how we embrace it initially and forget it after that first day. The gospel is just as true for you who don't know God right now and who are struggling with addiction and struggle, just hoping to find freedom, hoping to find peace, hoping to find grace through relationships or money or stuff or whatever. I'm telling you right now, if you're here today, Christ is the answer. But it's just as true for those of you who are here today that you're a Christian and you're still struggling. You're still struggling with money issues or anger issues or relational issues or sexual issues or problems with people or your job. I don't know what it is. The solution is not to manage it. The solution is not to come up. No. Matter of fact, I want to give you 3 steps really quickly as we wrap it up. Number 1 is this. Face it, it won't go away. Face it. You just got to own it. Today I want you to own it. We're going to do something a little bit different here in a second. I'm going to ask you to do something. I want you to own it. I want you just to own it. Like, I got a problem. I got an issue. I got a giant. I promise everyone does, but we're going to find out who's going to own it. Number 2 is recognize there's a spiritual component. Quit fighting your battles alone. You were not made to. The moment you step out of community, out of grace, out of God's presence, out of that line, out of the people resting, and you go fight it alone, that's the moment you lose. You do not measure up. But with God and your people, nothing is impossible. And you've got to recognize that the enemy has been calling you out and calling you to play by a set of rules that you were never intended to play by. You will lose every time you play by his rules. The last is do what God tells you to do. Fight it. Take it head on. Have the awkward conversation. Go confront something. Go give something. Go apologize to somebody. Go start digging into that debt go start serving your spouse, whether they love you, whether that's reciprocal. Go start serving them like crazy. I don't know what you got to do. Just go fight it. Go do whatever he tells you to do. Because as you're obedient, you pick up Christ, he's the one that's going to win the battle, not you. He's the one that's going to get the glory. That's what David understood. That's why David walked into it. He understood. It was never about him. He understood it's about God's glory. It's about what he's going to get. It's about what he's going to do in my life. He understood there's something bigger going on than just one man and one man. Even though the enemy wants to make it that way, we have to fight God's way. So here's what I want to do. I want us all to pray. Would you all bow your heads? I'm going to ask us to do something a little bit different. If you're here today and you have a giant that you need to deal with, I want to pray for you. I want to pray with you because there's a spiritual component, because there's something bigger going on, because it's not just about you and your problem. but I want you to own it. I want you to recognize it, and I want you to do something. Would you just raise your hand right now? Would you just lift your hand up and acknowledge, as you lift your hand, just acknowledge, you know what, God, I'm reaching out to you. I'm reaching to you and owning the fact that I've got something. I can't do it on my own. This is what I'm doing right now. I'm reaching. A lot of you have your hands up. Some of you, you need to. You need to reach it up. You need to own it. You need to quit pretending. You need to quit playing. And some of you here today, listen, you need to give your life to Christ. You need to make that decision. You need to reach for God because you've been trying to do it on your own power and your own strength. I want you to reach your hand up too. I want you to own that. Let's pray together. God, thank you for the gospel. Thank you that it saves. Thank you that it rescues. Thank you that you do the work, that all we need to do is pick you up. God, I thank you for the giant because it reveals I need your grace. I need your mercy. So God, for every man, woman, and child who raised their hand, I pray that you would speak to them, that you would communicate to them, that you would help them know what their next step is, that you would give them the strength, the confidence, and the courage to be who you called to be. As they reach their hands to you, God, I pray that you would meet them where they are. I pray for those who gave their life to Christ today, that you would rejuvenate them, that you would empower them to tell somebody about their next steps. God, help us become a tribe, a church of giant killers, to walk into this world realizing that you've got it. Help us be who you call us to be. Love you and thank you. Amen. Hey, before we dismiss, I want to say one last thing. Would you stand with me? Before we dismiss, if you gave your life to Christ today, would you let us know? It's one of the things that we say all the time. Listen, it's not our job to convict people, but man, it's our job to disciple people, to follow up. And we believe life change happens the moment you give your life to Christ, but there's a process that goes into that. And we would love to partner with you, give you a Bible, pray with you, help you, do whatever. So if you can just text no to 31996, or maybe you just need some help. Maybe you just want some help. Maybe you gave your life to Christ. You just want some follow-up, man. We'd love to talk to you. And so I don't know where you're at. What I know is this. You have a giant. I have a giant. Probably plural. You weren't made to fight him. You were made to give it to God. So this week, go in confidence and boldness in who God called you to be and fight your giants, because there's way more at stake than you realize. God bless. Have a great Sunday. We'll see you next week.